It was only after much consideration that I adopted the system of separating the notes from the text. The system has one disadvantage. The serious students must continually turn from one part of the book to another. But my notes are extensive, and if I had placed them at the bottom of each page, as is sometimes done, I should have split up the text in a most displeasing manner. Moreover, my subject is such as may arouse the interest of the general reader as well as that of the specialist, so I have wished to make the book as readable as I could. I fear that I have been compelled to tease the reader's eye by the insertion of many small reference numbers, but in the last 2 chapters, which are more likely than the others to be read consecutively, I have tried to reduce the inconvenience of the number by placing most of them at the end of paragraphs instead of at the end of sentences. Throughout the 2nd and 3rd chapters, the text is freely peppered with numbers, but that, I think, does not matter so much. The general reader is unlikely to study these chapters very closely, and the specialist will already have been hardened to the irritation that the numbers are apt to cause. I can best describe the general plan of the text by explaining how the book came to be written. It was in 1924 that after 10 years of intellectual laziness, 5 spent in war, 5 in commerce that involved some travel, I decided to devote myself to the study of human affairs. In the course of my subsequent reading, I came across the old Sumerian laws, the Hammurabi Code, the newly published Hittite laws, and the laws of Manu, and was much impressed by their character. At that time, the work of the analytical psychologists was still the subject of spirited debate. And from my study of those ancient records, read in the light of Hellenic and Roman history, there emerged a suspicion that in their conjectures about civilization, the psychologists might be right. And the more I studied historical societies, the more confident I became that the facts might support their theories. But I perceived that I could arrive at no safe decision unless I included uncivilized as well as civilized societies within the scope of the inquiry I decided to undertake. So, after summarizing some of the historical evidence in 2 short papers, I went up to the University of Cambridge in order to inquire into the relation between sexual opportunity and cultural condition among uncivilized peoples. When I first consulted some of the original authorities on uncivilized ideas and behavior, I began to despair, for it seemed that little sense could be made of the evidence. The current language of social anthropologists did not always appear to be exact, and I could not see my way to believe, in regard to uncivilized thought, many statements that some social anthropologists appear to accept without question. I had lived at close quarters with some uncivilized men, and I frankly doubted the reliability of much evidence that seemed to have satisfied my predecessors. Fortunately, in my first frame of reference, which contained 37 columns, I had included the people's rights as well as their beliefs, and gradually from this mass of data, there emerged the coincidences described in my first 3 chapters. These were indeed impressive, but I realized that I should not be able to understand either the different kinds of cultural behavior or the reason for the apparent coincidences unless I could gain some knowledge of the ideas that prompted the behavior. And it was in this manner that I was accosted by the phenomenon that is commonly but so misleadingly called the evolution of religion. My argument is that connection constitutes the greater part of my 4th chapter, and in order to avoid the dangers incurred by the practice of selecting instead of stating the facts, I have been careful, in this part of my work, to examine the evidence afforded by each one of my 80 societies, even though some of it is of such a quality as to have no real value. In the course of my exposition of the cultural data, I have had to make many adverse comments on some anthropological writings, but I can honestly say that I have confined my remarks to those writings which run the risk of being commonly and uncritically accepted at their face value. I have not gone out of my way to refute any opinion which bore no relation to my problem, and I hope that the criticisms I have made will be understood as springing only from a desire for greater exactitude and lucidity. I usually found that a good deal of preliminary work was necessary before any description of uncivilized ideas and behavior could be accepted as reliable evidence. After analyzing and drawing some conclusions from the anthropological evidence, I proceed in the second part of the 4th chapter to outline the opinions of competent psychologists in regard to the effect of compulsory continence. Trained psychologists will find that this part of my work is very elementary. They may be amused, too, by the shameless audacity of a man who approaches his problem from an out-and-out behavioristic point of view, and then asks the analysts for assistance. But I have no apology to make. I do not believe that human societies can be classified in any other way than according to their behavior. Thus, a behavioristic approach was forced upon me. And the whole point of my argument is that reasoning from any other data, the analytical psychologists have conjectured the facts to be as I have found them. It is commonly supposed, I believe, that when compulsory checks have to be placed on the sexual impulses, some form of neurosis is inevitably produced. If by neurosis we mean abnormality, this opinion is not supported by the facts. There is a sense in which all civilized persons suffer from a neurosis, but it is usual to apply the word to the nervous condition of maladjusted persons. In recent years, great stress has rightly been laid on the number of such persons in our society, and indeed in any branch of the white civilization. But we must not forget that the number of successful adjustments is much greater. Some of these successfully adjusted persons are just as neurotic, in the dictionary sense of the term, as those whom we call maladjusted, but their abnormality happens to be of a legal nature. On the instrument of human behavior, some notes are called normal, others abnormal, some eccentric, others criminal. In each case, the difference is not of kind, but of degree, and the limits are arbitrarily fixed by each society. Just as respectable misdemeanors are committed by most of us who are not imprisoned as criminals, so each one of us is guilty of a form of behavior which, if exaggerated, would produce the nervous condition medically diagnosed as neurosis. When compulsory continence is intense, some persons seem unable to adjust themselves to their cultural environment. But we must not allow our sympathy with them to conceal the existence of those who have succeeded in adjusting themselves. And we must not forget the relative character of our judgments. The evidence is that in the majority of cases, compulsory continence produces social energy. Only rarely does the consequent derangement of the nervous system lead to what is technically called neurosis.